Becca. All right, we're going to get back on our characters of the Bible. We're over here. We did Abraham, Isaac, and today we're on Jacob. And this was a good lesson. Isaac didn't have a whole lot of stuff written about him, but Jacob and Esau. It's really a good study. So we're probably not going to get through everything tonight, but we'll get into it. Tracy, you want to word the prayer for me, please, sir?
Most Holy Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings of it. Thank you for this time which we can gather among our friends and our family. We can be with those of like precious faith. We can study your word, your truth. We can learn from it. We can make applications where it's appropriate. That we'll be better students of your word and help us to make applications in our life. Forgive us of our sins and of our shortcomings and the things that we've neglected or things that we've done wrong. We humbly ask about forgiveness. Do with us through this study and throughout our lives. We ask for a home with thee in heaven in Christ's name.
Amen. Okay, so we're going to begin in Genesis chapter 25. So if you want to turn there, we'll begin with chapter 25. Like I said, we started off with Abraham had the 3 promises from God. He passed them through down to Isaac, and then now we've got Abraham. What were some similarities about our first 2, Abraham and Isaac, about having kids that we've talked about so far? Had them late in life, okay. They were promised. Was it natural? No, there was nothing natural about any of them, okay? What was not natural about the first one, Abraham? She was barren. She was also very old too, right? Past her bearing years, childbearing years. I was talking over through this when I was studying today, and my assistant, he came in, and I got to tell him, and I talked for an hour and a half going through everything on there, and he asked me a question. He said, well, so if they lived like 800 or 900 years, were they still young at 100? And I said, no, they were 100. Because a cat, they're old at 14 or 15, but it's different. So, and that's kind of sidetracked there. But when did people start living not quite as long? After the flood, okay? And so then, what was it about Abraham's first child that he had in relation to God and the promises? Not Abraham, that's Isaac. I'm sorry. So on Abraham, it was on Abraham. So what was it about Abraham's first child in relation to the promises? Okay, all right. So now, and granted, he may have been trying to help God or whatever, as you may say there, but it was not the way it was intended to be. And so then later on, when I believe he was 99, that's when God told him he was going to have a child within a year. Sarah laughed inside. And of course, they did have a child. And then immediately, right after that, what was the thing about Abraham and Isaac that was shocking to Abraham that God asked him to do? Sacrifice him, okay, to sacrifice his son. And so that was kind of leads us into Isaac. And then Isaac had the same kind of issue there with his wife. She was barren at that point. And so, there's some similarities here. So then we come to Jacob. And I'm going to read starting in chapter 25, and I'm going to read 19 through 34. Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of the, and I'm terrible on this stuff, Padam Aram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian, to be his wife, and Isaac. Okay, so when I just said that right there, remember who the sister of Rebekah is Laban, all right? Because they're going to come in later on. The brother of Rebekah is Laban. And Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she says, if it is so, why then am I this way? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in the womb, and the 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. When her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her in the womb. Now the first came forth red all over like in a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. And afterward her brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a peaceful man, living in tents. Now Isaac loved Esau. These are important things, because he had a taste for game. But Rebekah loved Jacob. And when Jacob had cooked stew, Esau came in from the field. He was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, please let me have a swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished. Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, first, sell me your birthright. And Esau said, behold, I'm about to die, so of what use is the birthright to me? And Jacob said, first, swear to me. So he swore to him and sold him his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So when you listen to the story right in here, as we start off, you can see that what was it? We've a lot of us have had kids here. Have you ever played favorites to some over the others? Okay, at least they think so. As 2 of my girls are over here. We have the golden child and the golden boy. Is that what it is on the end? Is it good to play favorites to any of your kids? I see a lot of no's. Got anybody want to speak up and say, tell us what happened in your childhood or anything?
I was the favorite.
You were the favorite? Yeah.
Oh, wait, I was the only and I was the worst.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the only one. Okay. No, seriously. What problems can it create by having a favorite? And this one right here, who was Isaac's favorite? Esau, the hunter, goes out. And then the other one seemed like Jacob seemed kind of like he likes to stay indoors. He was smooth skinned. The other one was hairy. I can only imagine what he looked like. But it does create problems, doesn't it? Okay? And I mean, I think these are lessons we can learn with our own family there. Even though me having raised 4 kids in the same house, every one of them are totally different. So I think the hard thing is balancing that to make sure you don't have favorites, or at least you encompass everything. I went down and we were with some guys in a golf trip this last week, and there was one guy that kind of headed it up. And he was very good about making sure that every one of us told our story, what our kids were doing. And he wouldn't just let, some of them were kind of shy and they wouldn't say very much, but he delved in and had them bring out what he was wanting them to all talk about themselves there. And I just think this is something that we can learn with our kids and how we should treat others. And then sometimes you can just be a part of a group and you see that it's happening from afar or something. Like if I'm sitting here with y'all and I see that it's happening in your family, and sometimes I can help out in that way. But I did think that was a lesson that we could bring out of this. Okay, so then he came out and Esau came out first, red-faced, and then Jacob came out and had his hand on his foot, had grabbed it. And tell me what this prophecy is talking about that the Lord said to her when she asked about them warring inside her tummy. So it was something that was going to be a long way down the road.
The younger would serve over the older.
Okay, all right.
Jesus would come through Jacob's line.
Okay, all right. And so, this is a prophecy that's carried out long after this, and it is definitely something that we can learn from. And Isaac prayed to the Lord, and his wife, and she was barren. That's one of the things also that I wanted to come back. It's just like the one before. She was barren, and Isaac had prayed, asking for the Lord to help her. So you look at things that I think are going to go on later on as we go through this lesson here. And I hope I don't just start telling the story without y'all reading. Tell me if I get past there. But it's easier for me to just tell the story than to try to read the different verses in there. But and so right at first, so he's gone out. What does it mean, the birthright? What is the birthright that Esau gave up? What does the firstborn of a family get that the rest don't?
They got
Double portion. Okay, so he gave up his birthright, gave up his double portion there.
Along with being the family's leader.
Yeah. And so this kind of starts telling you a little bit about the character about Esau. For Jacob, that birthright was very important. Okay, so was it good or bad what Jacob did in this situation? Wasn't right, was it? Okay.
It showed that he had more faith than Esau, though. He saw the value of it.
He did see the value of it. That's true.
And God
That's true.
favored him over Esau.
Yeah.
Because Jacob saw the value
Yeah.
of what.
Okay. So, in this situation here, he's definitely taking advantage of his brother. He's doing the wrong thing. But yet what he gets, and that's what, as you're going through this whole deal here, even at the end, whenever Isaac is being deceived again by Jacob there, he honors what he does whenever he gives him a blessing and things. So he goes through and follows through with what he's going to do. So he does get his his birthright. Okay, and then so it's very important to also understand here that the two different people that are training these two up, you've got Jacob and you got Esau. One of them is a skillful hunter, and the other one is inside with his mother. And I apologize, I just kind of lost my training here. Let's see here. Okay, so then over in Genesis chapter 27, towards the end of Isaac's life, he calls in Esau, and he's towards the end of his life, and he's wanting Esau to go out and make a kill, bring him back. That's his favorite thing to eat there. So he asked him to go out and do that for him, and that if he would do that, he would give him a blessing. And it's not like us asking for a blessing whenever. I mean, when they blessed him there, it was significant. So he goes out and he does that. Well, who overhears the conversation? Rebekah does. Who's Rebekah partial to? Jacob. So she schemes and says, I'm going to have you come in. She tells him the story. Won't you go into Isaac? I'll cook a lamb just like your father likes it. We'll have you go in there and you can get the blessing posing as Esau. And Jacob says, what if he recognizes me? It'll be a curse upon me. And then she says, no, the curse will be upon me. That's what Rebekah said. So then he responds and he says to, well, surely as I come in. Now remember, Isaac can't see very good. If it was me, I wouldn't be able to hear very good whenever they came in. But Isaac can't see, and he comes in. But he says, what's the difference in the outside between Esau and Jacob? One's hairy, and the other one's not. So they get a coat type deal to go over him to make him hairy. And he wears that. They prepare the meal, and then they go in. And Isaac says, you've already made your kill. You know, he's kind of surprised it hadn't been very long. And then this is what he said, well, God was with me, and so I have this meal for you, which, I mean, when I read that, you know, that's a lie. And so he comes in, he prepares the meal, he likes the meal, and then he says, come to me, you sound like your brother Jacob, but here, let me hold you. And he holds him. Of course, he feels the hairy part of him. And he said, surely you are Jacob. And he smells him. And what I didn't tell you earlier is they went and got some of Esau's clothes, and he put some of his clothes on. What's the difference smell between someone that's inside all the time and someone's outside all the time? Smell a little different? Okay, Mr. Hunter, Donnie Lamphere, when you've killed something, what do you smell like?
He said blood.
Blood, absolutely. You're going to have a smell when you come home and you've had a kill. Definitely when you're outside. But you'll have the smell of outside and probably the smell of blood whenever you come in there. So he smelled of Jacob, and he had those clothes on. He said, surely you are. And then he blessed him, just like he said he would. And so in this part right here, what do y'all think about Rebekah's part in this role? Rebekah. Go ahead.
My ways have a little bit different, I think, but
All right.
it wasn't honest.
Right.
But she had been told before the boys were born that the younger one would be the master. The older one would serve the younger one.
Right. True.
Isaac also knew that. They
Right.
both knew it. She was adhering more to the will of God by pushing Jacob forward
Right.
than Isaac was by trying to push Esau forward.
Okay.
So it wasn't perfect what she did,
Yeah.
but in a lot of ways, she's commended throughout the rest of the Bible, and Jacob certainly commended through the rest of the Bible.
Right.
And Esau is condemned.
Yeah.
So God always presents both sides, the good side and the bad side of people. But the ones that were faithful to him often did things that weren't right.
True.
But
Yeah.
they were trying to pursue doing what God wanted.
Well, and I still think the answer is no, she did the wrong thing by scheming and everything, but God used our errors sometime towards his good. Not that he had them do them, but he used that towards his good there. So absolutely, I do agree with you. That's a good point, though, that she knew from the prophecy early on, or she probably knew. She may have
And
known.
so did Sarah,
Yeah,
but she did wrong.
yeah,
And it's specific that she did wrong.
right.
And Jacob lies.
Yeah, He sure did.
Because he says, I am Esau.
Yeah. Well, and then he knew enough to know that if he got caught, he'd be cursed at that point too. And so,
But they were trying to work God's plan
mhm,
instead of letting God work
Right.
God's plan.
okay.
I guess I've thought it this way too, is Jacob already had the birthright. He already was going to be the lead of the house.
Right.
Why did he need more?
Right.
You know, his mother was trying to get him to have even more.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Rebecca, as you just said, one thing that they did do, though, is they moved on from their past. They didn't dwell in the past. And Jacob was faithful to God. You see that time and time again as he goes throughout. Is there anything holding us back from our past? Do we have anything in our lives that we feel like we can't get over and move towards God's plan for us? I mean, you go back and you think about some of the people like David, some of the things that they did wrong, and yet they overcame. I'm not saying that God forgot them. They asked for forgiveness and they changed and they went forward. And they were great in the sight of God in the things that they did. And I just come back because this is a question that came out in the lesson here is we should remember ourselves that anything that we've had in the past, however bad, as long as we repented of them, and we should go forward and not let that drag us down whenever we're going forward. Yes, sir.
Sometimes we do suffer the consequences of those actions, and it might be the word karma.
Yeah.
Used here because if you look at here this man Jacob and what's going to happen later with him, when his own children end up deceiving him,
Right.
thinking that now Joseph is a goner, and so the same type of deception in a way.
Yeah.
He worked against his own father. It's now going to be worked against him later on in time to come.
Oh, and don't forget too. There's a older brother that's really mad at you too, and he's already said, not to his dad Isaac, but when he passes away, I'm going to kill my brother, and so then Rebecca knows that and hears that, and so she's going to try to get him to go away. So what's the next part in this, if anybody knows it in this part right here, what's the next part in this as far as what Rebecca advises to Jacob? We're going to go away. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're going to go find a wife. Where does he not want to get a wife? In Canaan. Not a Canaanite. Y'all remember the person I said earlier on that was Rebecca's brother? All right. Okay, let me skip over here real quick. All right. That name that I couldn't pronounce is way up there at the top. Padam Aram. Now, if we had Mr. Miller here today, he would be quoting every one of these things. I just can't do it. That's Heron at the top. He's all the way down here at the bottom. Down in here is where he is to start off with. And he's going to head up there to go find him a wife. And that's where Laban is, her brother. That's where he lives. And so he's going to head that way. Now, when he first takes off, he stops in Bethel, which is just a short ways there. And he's going to go to sleep at night. And the story is he uses a rock for a pillow. We got rocks at our house for pillows. I got one. I told Red I want a soft one, but I just can't imagine having a rock for a pillow there. Anyway, he goes to sleep and the Lord comes to him in a dream. What does he tell him? Wouldn't you like for the Lord to come to you and say what he said to him? What does he tell him? Okay. Anybody got it? Okay, so God tells him, I am with you, and I will bring you back to the place where I have given to you, and I will bless you. Can you imagine? I mean, what comforting letter, I mean, what that that would be for God to reassure you along the way that you're doing the right thing. So he's heading up, and he gets up to Laban up there, and he sees this. He goes to a well, and there's a girl coming there to water the animals there, and that's when he meets Sarah at that point, or I'm sorry. Yeah, Rachel and Leah is this one this week, and Rachel comes walking up, and he really likes her. Okay, so he finds out she's of the family that she's going to go see. So he goes to Laban, and he is wanting her in marriage. What does Laban tell him he's got to do to get his daughter? Work for 7 years. That's what I think we ought to do with kids now these days. And they do give dowries too, don't they, or something? Anyway, so that's what he does. And in there it said that as he was working, it said 7 years went by like nothing. And so then he was asking for her, and so they had that night. Who did Laban send in to Jacob at night? Leah, the older sister. Okay, he didn't realize it till the next morning. He said, "What have you done to me?" And he comes out there and he says, "Well, in our family, it's a custom that the oldest one is given away first. So if you'll complete this week with her, then I'll let you have Rachel at that time." So that's what he does. He said, "But you got to work another 7 years for Rachel." What do y'all think about his reaction, how he's treating? Is he right or wrong in his request of Jacob? Seems like he's kind of taking advantage of him a little bit. Okay. But Jacob's doing his time, and at the end of 7 years, then he's ready to take both of the girls with him. But he's afraid. He's afraid that Laban's going to not let them go. So what does he do? He takes off. And then Laban's coming after him full force to come after he finds out that he's left, and they're chasing him. And one of the things that when they were leaving there, some of the girls went back in and got some of their stuff. And part of the stuff that they got were some of the gods that Laban had in there. Those would be physical things that represented their gods, and she brought them with them. But now Jacob didn't know that. She had just taken those with them. So as they're going, finally Laban catches up with him, and he says, he asks him, "Why are you chasing me?" And he says, "Because you've taken my daughters, my grandchildren, and you've stolen my gods." And Jacob says, "Well, if we've stolen your gods, whoever has taken that, they'll surely die." And so he goes in and starts looking in all the tents. Do y'all know the end of this story? No? You know the end goes in all the tents, and they can't find it. Come out, and they're coming to Rachel. She's sitting on her horse, and she says, "I'm on my period at this time. I can't get off." And they don't do anything at that point. And so she gets away with it. But then, he lets them go on, but they make a pact together that they're not going to go after each other. And those are some of those little markers that Mr. Miller was talking about last week. And so he got to go on. You know, a lot of this, you can look at back in the way they ran, and it seemed like Isaac didn't run the family as strongly. It seemed like the women kind of had some control. Seemed like he should have had a little bit more control over the women at that point in there. They had multiple wives, And so it would be challenging at best if you had multiple wives, I would think. And then but when Jacob goes up there and he gets these wives, now it's time to start having kids. And it's a circus, if y'all have read all of this right in here. And so at first, now remember, you got Leah and then Rachel. Rachel's the one he loved. And so as they're coming down through there, he's spending more time with Rachel, and Leah doesn't feel loved. And God knows that. He hears her, whether it's in her prayers or what, he knows that. And so he allows her to have the children. And so she starts having children. Well, what's that going to do to Rachel at some point? A little jealousy going to come up there? Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. And so then she asked her attendant, as they called it, to have a child. So they were married and then had a child. And she had several child. And who are these men that are being born? Who do they become someday? 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so these are not unimportant people that are being born here. But some of y'all didn't have it because I didn't include it in this last little part here. But by the way, he's gone all the way up there, and then he's heading back down to his land, is where he's coming to. And I don't have this genealogy here, but I have it more here for whenever y'all start asking me questions, and I can go back and start looking at it there. Because it starts getting complicated when we're getting down here towards the end. But in here, Jacob, you got Jacob, Zilphat, Leah, which is the older one, Rachel, and then Bilhah. And so, and it's really, if you go back and you study through there, and Mike's heading towards ringing, but it's just the names of these kids, Levi and Dan and some of these, their names meant certain things, and it had to do with what was going on in family dynamics and stuff right there. So it's really an interesting read whenever you go back and you start seeing all of these. So Leah starts off, and she has several boys. Then Rachel gets Bilhah to have a child or two. And then Leah, who hadn't had any kids in a while, so she gets her handmaiden to have a couple of them there. And then I think Rachel finally has one, and what is his name? Has two. Joseph and Benjamin. Okay. And then I think Leah wraps it up and has one or two after that at some point. But so we got 12, and this later on is going to be the 12 tribes of Israel, these people. And of course Levi, if y'all, what's significant about Levi and his family? Okay, all right. So these are significant people. And then some of the things that I told you that were wrong, remember we've got we got it's four different families in there with these different women. And then you got little Joseph down there at the end. And what does Jacob do? Who's Jacob's favorite? Joseph. Okay. Does that cause problems? Okay. Yeah, it later does. And so same dynamics happen within Jacob's family there, as far as the things that the problems that come from these different things. On the way back down through there, it had been, I think, 14 years since he had left. And who does he has to face up to as he's coming back to the family? Esau.
I think it had been 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years. And what's he worried about Esau for? He's wanting to kill him. He's taking away his birthright and the blessing too. The story, so as they're coming up, Esau's coming. Esau's coming, and he's coming by himself. He's got 400 men coming with him. And so what does Jacob do to diffuse the situation?
Breaks up the
Sin-
family.
Yeah, so first of all, he breaks the family up on both sides. So hopefully both of them won't get killed, I guess. But then he starts sending out messengers with gifts, and there's hundreds of animals that he's sending out there to give to them. And so how does the story end when Esau finally sees him and greets him? He's glad to see his brother, isn't he? Okay. And in fact, he says, all those gifts I don't need, I've got plenty, take it back. And he said, no, it was a gift from God. I want you to have these. And so he insists and he takes them. But I skipped over that part in here. It was really, this lesson, when I put it together, it was not in order that you read in the Bible. And so I was trying to adjust it before I got here tonight, and that's why I was getting... there are a lot of different mentioning of all these events in the New Testament. Some of you got these verses down here that I handed out, and it just has some verses where they're mentioning some of these different cities. I wish I was as smart as Mr. Miller was. I really thought he did a really good job. And I do think it is important for us to try to remember, and I think I'm remembering these names a little bit better, but I do believe these places are significant. And it's really neat, of course, when he's talked about the pillow, the rock for the pillow, and building a pillar to it, it's exactly what he was describing. And those people in those times knew about those things and what it meant too. And they're significant. A lot of these are wells that they've drilled or not drilled, but dug out, and they're significant, these wells, and several events occur at the same different ones. Then you have Laban, who ends up being part of the story later on, and he was there at the well whenever Isaac met Rebekah. And it's just really neat. I think that gave me a good perspective there, Mr. Miller, this last week. There's some of those points of interest. Does anybody else have some comments they want to make? Raising kids. Retta controls the house that I'm at. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Happy wife, happy life. Yes.
An important point, I think, is that although Jacob got the blessing that he wanted, deceiving his father cost him dearly as he went on down through his life.
Yeah.
And the irony of it all is that it would have been God's determination that he get the blessing in. He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He didn't have to deceive anybody.
Right.
He didn't have to go on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely injured the relationship between Jacob and Isaac after that point, because Isaac favored Esau.
I think that God did not like the fear that Jacob had in returning, worrying what Esau would do.
Right.
Because God had already promised, I will bring you back.
Yes.
So there's a lack of trust in God.
Yeah.
And God wrestles with him through the
Yeah.
angel. And
Well-
now, he's limping along. He can't even run anymore.
Well, and on that same point too, what Rebecca was saying is he's coming back. He prayed to God, to the Lord, who had promised him this home. He prayed that he would take care of him, and he trusted in that. He did. I think that was, yes, ma'am.
God doesn't look at people the way we look at people.
True.
And yes, we have to admit the things that Jacob did wrong, and I know he certainly did some things wrong. But in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 9, he says, Jacob I had loved, Esau I had hated.
Right.
In Hebrews chapter 12, he says Esau was a profane person.
Right.
So don't be like Esau.
Right.
Who was a profane person, who did not recognize the value of his birthright.
Right.
And then other places, Jacob is called God's servant.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he's always twice many of us reference the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
So
Right,
we should recognize as outstanding.
absolutely,
That's not to say we condone, because we don't judge Stephen, God judges Stephen.
right.
We can recognize him, but Jacob was very definitely in God's good faith.
Absolutely. Good points. Good points.